Good morning, everybody. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here with another edition of Tropics Talk on this Thursday, June the 10th. As we look out across the tropical Atlantic, pretty quiet. In fact, if you were watching earlier on this week, the Hurricane Center had highlighted the South Caribbean Sea for potential development in the longer range. They've since dropped that. Doesn't necessarily mean we can stop sort of watching the area, but it sort of speaks to how the NHC does things. Their outlooks only go out 5 days. So at this point, in the next 5 days, nothing's going to come together. It doesn't mean that nothing will going in the longer range from there. But as we look across the South Caribbean Sea right now, we are looking for the potential for a disturbance to spin up here in this time frame, and just nothing going right now. In fact, skies are mainly clear east of Central America right now. Some general storminess over southern portions of Mexico, over Central America, and that's still going to be the case here the next couple of days. I still think we're going to see some increased thunderstorm activity as broad low pressure forms over the eastern Pacific, over Central America, and southern Mexico. Now, like I said, through 5 days for the Hurricane Center, no development is expected. After that, we're still going to have to watch the western Gulf of Mexico. This is from the European forecast model. And of note, it continues to show very high chances that something comes together from this sort of broad low pressure area in the eastern Pacific. The question is if something also is able to come together in the Atlantic Basin, the Gulf of Mexico in particular. Now, the European puts this at a 35% chance that there's a tropical depression out there, or at least a low pressure area making winds of that threshold by late next week. We're talking the Thursday, Friday time frame. In fact, let's dive in. So here is the European forecast model solution. This is Saturday morning. And again, no organization at this point in time. You see a little closed off low south of Mexico in the Pacific, but otherwise just a whole lot of rain and storminess in Mexico and Central America at this point in time. Go forward. Here we go. Into Tuesday. Still seeing a whole lot of rain, but nothing in the Gulf of Mexico as far as any proper low pressure area. By the time we get to Wednesday, now you see how the isobars, and those are the white lines I'm showing you here, starting to close off a little bit over South Mexico. You're seeing turning of the winds going on, a broad counterclockwise flow going on, some low pressure area trying to get its act together in the Bay of Campeche, and then by the time we get to Thursday on this model, it has closed off a little area of spin, and it begins to deepen a low pressure area. By Friday, the European continues to suggest there is perhaps a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm, a big rainmaker, regardless, in the western Gulf of Mexico. And it has been fairly consistent in a solution just like this, sort of locked in on that idea. Also of note, and you see the twin low pressure area south and west of Mexico, what would definitely be at that point in time a tropical depression or tropical storm. So I still think there's room for the idea that maybe these models just aren't sort of keying in on, well, what's going on with that Pacific storm. They're bringing off a lobe of that low pressure and then closing it off and spinning it up when it shouldn't be doing that. But again, the European has just been awfully consistent on that for me to say, let's discount that entirely. And when we look at the GFS forecast model, latest run this morning, it shows a somewhat similar but also rather different solution. We go forward here, and there's Wednesday. You're not seeing that turning of the winds in the Bay of Campeche. You're not seeing any type of low pressure area there. In fact, all the way through Friday, when, again, think back to the European, it had that low sitting off to the south of Texas. Now you are starting to see some of that turning of the wind, though. Perhaps some gradual organization. And then by the end of the weekend, it has open low pressure in the central Gulf, and it brings that north and northeast towards Florida. It never develops anything proper like a tropical depression or tropical storm, but it does bring that moisture, at least the flow of tropical moisture, into Florida as opposed to the western Gulf of Mexico. But when you dive deeper into the ensemble from that same run, from that same time frame, the 6C run, this model, yeah, it does have a few of those members moving off to the east, but that really appears to be sort of an outlier solution. More of the members have low pressure in the western Gulf of Mexico like the European forecast model, and in fact the majority show very weak low pressure dying off in the Bay of Campeche and over eastern portions of Mexico. So I think really the key takeaway from this is At this point in time, there's very little concrete to hang on to as to what's going to go on next week. The range of possibilities open from nothing, just some sloppy weather in Mexico and Central America, perhaps a depression or storm in the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps we just have some moisture headed toward Florida. But regardless, it's definitely something to keep an eye on next week, as we will be. Otherwise, though, in the Atlantic, it's really quiet, and that's a big part of the reason why. There's a whole lot of Saharan dust out there, as we often see early on in the season. This latest plume stretches all the way now from the central Caribbean Sea back to the coast of Africa, and in fact, when we look at our Saharan dust tracker, which sort of mocks out where that's going to go, that initial plume moves its way across the Caribbean, some of that trying to work into the skies here in Florida by the weekend. Then there's a second burst of dry, dusty air set to move off the coast of Africa into the weekend, keeping the Caribbean, the Central and Eastern Atlantic very, very quiet. Remember, when Saharan dust is present, that's a dry, warm layer of air in the middle and upper levels of the atmosphere. That means temperatures are rising as you go up in the atmosphere. That's a very stable situation. So nothing's able to get going in that type of environment. And as such, per the Hurricane Center, no development expected through the next 5 days. Again, though, into next week, we will be watching the Gulf of Mexico. That's really the spot to watch. If there's anything that's going to form in the next week to 10 days, that's where it's going to be. Otherwise, Saharan dust keeps a lid on the rest of the basin, and at the very least, nothing to worry about here this weekend. So that's it for Tropics Talk here this week. Of course, keep it with us here on ABC 7. We'll be keeping you updated on anything and everything going on out there across the Atlantic in the next couple of days and all the way through the rest of the hurricane season. Until next time, I'm meteorologist Jim Dickey. Have a great weekend.